The Prodigal Son. Once, in a land of rolling hills and fertile fields, there lived a wealthy landowner who had two sons. The elder son, steady and dutiful, worked diligently by his father's side, tending to the family's vast estate. The younger son, however, was restless and filled with a thirst for adventure. He yearned to explore the world beyond the borders of his father's land, to taste the sweetness of freedom and independence. One day, the younger son approached his father with a bold request. "Father," he said, "give me my share of the inheritance now. I wish to go out into the world and make my own way." The father, though saddened by his son's impatience and lack of understanding, loved him deeply and wanted him to find his own path in life. And so, with a heavy heart, he divided his wealth between his two sons, giving the younger son his portion of the inheritance. With his newfound riches in hand, the younger son set off on his journey, eager to experience all that the world had to offer. He traveled to distant lands, where he reveled in the pleasures of life without restraint. He squandered his wealth on extravagant parties and lavish living, surrounded by flatterers and hangers-on who cared only for his money. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the younger son's fortune began to dwindle. His friends vanished like mist in the morning sun, leaving him alone and destitute. And then, to make matters worse, a great famine swept across the land, leaving him hungry and desperate. In his darkest hour, the prodigal son found himself in a foreign land, working as a hired hand to feed pigs. He was so hungry that he longed to eat the pods he fed to the swine, but no one offered him anything. He was filled with shame and regret, realizing the foolishness of his ways. Finally, he came to his senses and resolved to return to his father's house, to beg for forgiveness and mercy. "I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" And so, with a heavy heart and weary feet, the prodigal son began the long journey home. He rehearsed his speech along the way, hoping for a chance at redemption. But what he did not expect was the overwhelming love and grace that awaited him. Meanwhile, back at the father's house, the elder son continued to toil in the fields, faithfully carrying out his duties. When he heard that his younger brother was returning, he was filled with anger and resentment. "How can my father welcome back that wastrel with open arms?" he muttered to himself. "He doesn't deserve it." But the father, who had been watching and waiting for his lost son to return, caught sight of him from a distance. Filled with compassion and love, he ran out to meet him, throwing his arms around him in a warm embrace. "Welcome home, my son," he cried, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. The prodigal son was stunned by his father's response. He had expected anger and condemnation, but instead, he found only love and forgiveness. "Father," he stammered, "I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father would hear none of it. "Quick," he said to his servants, "bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And so, the household was filled with music and laughter as they celebrated the prodigal son's return. But outside, in the fields, the elder son stood alone, his heart heavy with bitterness and resentment. "Why does my father show such favor to my brother?" he grumbled to himself. "I have been loyal and obedient all these years, and yet he has never thrown a feast in my honor." But the father, sensing his elder son's distress, came out to him and pleaded with him to join the celebration. "My son," he said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And so, the elder son reluctantly joined the festivities, but his heart was still heavy with resentment, for he could not understand the depth of his father's love, nor the boundless mercy that had been shown to his wayward brother. In this parable of the prodigal son, Jesus teaches us about the unfathomable love and grace of God. Like the father in the story, God eagerly awaits the return of his lost children, ready to welcome them back with open arms. He rejoices over each sinner who repents, showering them with love and forgiveness. And he calls us, his faithful servants, to do the same, to embrace our brothers and sisters with compassion and grace, and to celebrate the redemption of the lost. If you like the parable, you can subscribe and like, for which I will be very grateful. Thanks for watching. Don't be sad.